I watched my daughter-in-law throw my Purple Heart in the trash and laugh. My name is George Mitchell. I'm 71 years old, and I've been living quietly with my son Michael and his wife Brittany for 3 years, since my wife Dorothy passed away from cancer. What Brittany didn't know as she sold my worthless junk to neighbors for pennies was that I'd already made a phone call that would change everything. She called me dead weight, a financial burden, worthless trash taking up space in her house. She was about to discover that appearances can be devastatingly deceiving, and that sometimes the quietest person in the room holds all the real power. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I just smiled, walked inside, and checked my phone for the confirmation email I'd been waiting for. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I think you'll want to hear how this story ends. But to understand what I'd already done, you need to know how we got here. After Dorothy died, I sold our family home and moved in with Michael and Brittany. I thought it would be temporary, just until I figured things out. They lived in this beautiful 2-story colonial in Maple Grove, Minnesota. Big oak trees, brick walkway, the kind of neighborhood where families barbecue together on weekends. I kept to myself mostly. Had a small bedroom upstairs with a window facing the backyard. I'd ride my old 1998 Schwinn bicycle to the thrift store every Tuesday, buy my clothes there. $3.99 cardigans, $5 pants. I never wanted to be a burden, but Brittany saw things differently. The first sign I was being underestimated came during dinner conversations. Michael would ask about my day, and before I could answer, Brittany would interrupt. Dad, honestly, what kind of day could he possibly have? He rides that squeaky bike to buy old man clothes. She'd say it with this laugh, like I wasn't sitting right there. The second sign was how she talked about money. Every monthly expense became my fault. The electric bill's so high because he keeps his room warm. The grocery bill's doubled since he moved in. Michael, we're supporting a 71-year-old man who contributes nothing. Contributing nothing. That stung. What she didn't know was that I'd been writing checks, quietly helping with their mortgage payments when Michael's construction work slowed down. I'd slipped the money to him directly, told him not to mention it to Brittany. $300 here, $500 there. Over the past year, I'd helped them with nearly $8,000. But I kept those receipts in my manila folder marked Private, GM, along with other important papers. Brittany never asked what was in there. She started treating me like hired help. George, take out the trash. George, your bicycle's blocking the driveway again. George, we need to talk about your future living arrangements. That last one came up more and more. I'd hear her talking to Michael late at night when she thought I was asleep. Your father needs professional care, Michael. We're not equipped for this. There are lovely nursing homes, and honestly, we could use his room as my home office. Home office. For her online jewelry business, that made maybe $200 a month. My son, God bless him, would try to defend me. Brittany, he's family. He's not bothering anyone. Not bothering anyone? Michael, look at him. Thrift store clothes, that ancient bicycle, sitting in the living room watching television we pay for. When's the last time he contributed anything meaningful to this household? Meaningful contributions. I thought about Dorothy, how we'd saved every penny for 45 years, how we'd built something together, how I'd been the anonymous donor to 3 local charities for the past decade, never wanting recognition. But Brittany couldn't see past appearances. She started making comments in front of neighbors. We'd be outside, maybe I'd be checking the mail, and she'd stage these loud conversations. Oh, Patty, you're so lucky your parents are independent. Michael's father requires so much care and attention. We're basically running a senior care facility here. Patty Henderson, our neighbor across the street, would look uncomfortable. She'd taught 4th grade for 30 years before retiring. She knew condescension when she heard it. The breaking point was building. I could feel it every morning when Brittany would slam cabinets in the kitchen, every evening when she'd talk about nursing home brochures she'd been collecting. But what she didn't know was that every time she mentioned those nursing homes, every time she called me worthless dead weight, I was making mental notes. And I'd been making some phone calls, quiet phone calls that would soon matter very much, because I learned something important during my 71 years on this earth. Sometimes the best response to disrespect isn't confrontation. Sometimes it's simply letting people reveal exactly who they are, and then responding accordingly. The nursing home research started in earnest 3 weeks before the garage sale incident. I came home from my Tuesday bicycle ride to find Brittany at the kitchen table with colorful brochures spread out like travel pamphlets. Sunset Manor, Golden Years Care, Peaceful Meadows Assisted Living. George, perfect timing, sit down. She had that tone, the tone you use with children or people you think can't understand complex concepts. Michael and I have been discussing your future, and we think it's time to explore some options that would be better for everyone involved. Better for everyone. Code for better for Brittany. She slid a brochure across the table. Sunset Manor has a wonderful program for seniors. 3 meals a day, activities, medical care on site. And look at these prices. I looked. $4,800 a month for a basic room. $6,200 for a private room with a window. That's quite expensive, I said quietly. Well, yes, but you have Social Security, and I'm sure you have some savings tucked away somewhere. Some savings tucked away somewhere. If she only knew. My Social Security was $1,137 a month. Even she could do that math. Brittany, my Social Security wouldn't cover half of that. Right, which is why we need to have a grown-up conversation about your assets. That house you and Dorothy owned, you must have gotten something when you sold it. Your pension from the electrical company. Dorothy's life insurance. She was fishing, trying to figure out exactly how much money I had access to. I get by, I said. Getting by isn't enough anymore, George. We need exact numbers. Michael and I are trying to plan our future, maybe start a family, but we can't do that with uncertainty about your long-term care situation. Start a family. Now I understood the urgency. That night, I heard them arguing through the walls. Just ask him directly about his finances, Brittany was saying. He's living in our house rent-free, eating our food. We have a right to know if he can afford proper care. Our house? Michael sounded confused. You know what I mean. The house we're responsible for. The house we're building equity in. Michael's construction business had been struggling. 3 months earlier, he'd come to me worried about making the mortgage payment. I'd written him a check for $800, told him it was a gift from Dorothy's life insurance money. He'd been so grateful. What Michael didn't know, what Brittany certainly didn't know, was that I didn't just have some savings tucked away. And I definitely didn't just have Dorothy's small life insurance policy. The next morning, Brittany escalated. George, I've made some calls. Sunset Manor has an opening next month. The good news is, if we move quickly, we can lock in current pricing before their rates increase. She showed me papers, application forms, financial disclosure requirements, emergency contact information. You'll need to provide 3 years of bank statements, proof of income, and documentation of any assets including investments, property, or valuable personal items. Documentation of assets. My manila folder upstairs contained documentation she couldn't even imagine. I'll need some time to gather those documents, I said. How much time? Because, George, honestly, this situation has become untenable. Michael agrees that professional care is the right choice for everyone. The thing about ultimatums is they force clarity. In that moment, sitting at their kitchen table with nursing home brochures and financial disclosure forms, I realized something important. If I stayed silent, if I continued being the grateful, unassuming house guest, I would lose everything that mattered. My dignity, my autonomy, my connection to the life Dorothy and I had built together. But more than that, I would be enabling Brittany to continue treating elderly people like inconvenient obstacles to be managed and removed. That afternoon, while Brittany was at her pottery class and Michael was at a job site, I went upstairs to my room and opened my manila folder. Inside were documents that would surprise a lot of people. Bank statements from Mitchell Family Trust showing a current balance of $2,837,000. Incorporation papers for the Mitchell Children's Foundation, established in Dorothy's memory, with an endowment of $35 million. A Forbes magazine article from 18 months ago titled America's Secret Philanthropists, featuring a photograph of me standing outside Children's Hospital of Minneapolis. And something else. Something I'd been considering for weeks but hadn't had the courage to act on. A property deed filed in 1987 showing the purchase of 4,247 Maple Grove Circle for $127,000. Sole owner, George Mitchell. The house Brittany kept calling ours wasn't theirs at all. I'd been letting my son and daughter-in-law live in my house rent-free for 3 years, and now Brittany wanted to kick me out so she could convert my bedroom into her home office. That evening, I made a phone call that would change everything. The first major confrontation happened on a Thursday morning in early June. I was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper when Brittany came downstairs with a box in her hands. She set it down on the coffee table with enough force to make my coffee cup rattle. "George, we need to talk about your things." I looked up from the sports section. "My things? All of this." She gestured around the room. "Your books on the shelf, your reading glasses everywhere, your medications cluttering the kitchen counter. If you're moving to Sunset Manor next month, we need to start packing." Next month. She'd made the decision without asking me. "I haven't agreed to Sunset Manor," I said quietly. "George, come on. We've discussed this. It's what's best for everyone." "It's what's best for you." Her face changed. The fake cheerfulness disappeared. "Excuse me? You want me gone so you can have my room? Your room?" She laughed, but it wasn't friendly. "George, this isn't your house. You don't get to decide how we use our space." Our space. There it was again. I folded my newspaper and looked at her directly. "Whose name is on the deed?" "What?" "The deed to this house. Whose name is on it?" She looked confused for a moment, then irritated. "Michael's name, obviously. He's the one paying the mortgage." "Is he?" Something in my tone made her pause. "What do you mean, is he?" "I mean, have you actually seen the mortgage documents? Have you looked at the deed?" "Of course I have. George, what are you getting at?" She was lying. I could tell because she'd started using my name more frequently, the way people do when they're trying to establish authority they don't actually have. "I'm just curious about the paperwork," I said. "Since you're so concerned about my finances, I thought you might be equally curious about your own housing situation." Brittany stared at me for a long moment. This was the most I'd pushed back since moving in, and she didn't like it. "Fine, George. You want to play games? Let's talk about contribution. Let's talk about who pays for what around here." She sat down across from me, leaning forward like she was about to deliver a presentation. "Monthly mortgage payment, $2,100. Michael pays that. Utilities, $350 average. Michael pays that. Groceries for 3 people instead of 2, $400 extra per month. Michael pays that. Property taxes, $4,000 annually. Michael pays that." She was building her case point by point. "Your contribution, $0, 0 cents. Your presence, 1 elderly man requiring supervision, assistance, and patience. Your future value to this household, declining daily." Future value, like I was a stock investment. "So when I say this isn't your house, George, I mean you have no equity here, no ownership, no rights to make decisions about who lives where or for how long." I let her finish. I let her lay out her entire argument about contribution and ownership and rights. Then I asked a simple question. What happens if the person who actually owns this house decides he wants his room back? What are you talking about? Hypothetically, what if the legal owner of this property decided that the current arrangement wasn't working? She rolled her eyes. "George, Michael owns this house. We've been over this." "Have we?" I stood up and walked to the window facing the front yard. Our neighbor, Patty Henderson, was checking her mail across the street. She waved, and I waved back. "Patty's lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, I said. "She remembers when Dorothy and I bought this house. She remembers us moving in, painting the shutters, planting those oak trees." Brittany was quiet behind me. She probably remembers Dorothy's funeral, too. How the whole neighborhood came to pay respects to a woman who'd lived here for decades. I turned around to look at Brittany. She might be curious to know that the woman who inherited this house is now being told she has no rights here. "You inherited this house?" Brittany's voice was different now, smaller. "I inherited Dorothy's half. I already owned the other half." The color was draining from her face. "But Michael said—" "What did Michael say exactly?" She stood up, agitated. "He said you sold your house after Dorothy died. He said you needed somewhere to stay temporarily." "I did sell a house, just not this one." The room was quiet except for the sound of the air conditioning cycling on. "This is impossible," she said finally. "Michael would have told me. We've been making mortgage payments." "Have you seen the bank statements?" "Yes, No, Michael handles the finances, but you assumed." She started pacing. her mind working through the implications. Even if this is your house, we've been paying for maintenance, improvements, utilities. We have rights as tenants. Tenants. Now we were getting somewhere. Do you have a lease agreement? We don't need a lease agreement. We're family. Are we? That stopped her pacing. Because family members don't usually demand financial disclosure forms from each other. Family members don't usually research nursing homes without consultation. Family members don't usually refer to each other as burdens who contribute nothing. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it. Excuse me. I need to take this call. I walked toward the kitchen, leaving Brittany standing in the living room with her box of my things and a growing realization that nothing was what she thought it was. The text was from my lawyer, Jim Sullivan. Documents ready for signature. Can meet tomorrow if convenient. I texted back. Tomorrow works perfectly. After that confrontation, Brittany became quieter but more determined. She didn't directly challenge me about the house ownership again, but I could tell she was investigating. I'd catch her having whispered phone conversations or typing intensely on her laptop when she thought I wasn't looking. 2 days later, she approached me with a different strategy. George, I owe you an apology. I was in the kitchen, making my morning coffee. Oh, I was pushy about the nursing home situation. Michael and I talked, and we agree that any decisions about your living arrangements should be your choice. This was new. Brittany didn't apologize for things. I appreciate that, I said. But I do have a small request. For our own financial planning, would you be comfortable sharing some basic information about your situation? Not for any immediate decisions, just so we can help you plan for the future. She was trying a softer approach. The concerned daughter-in-law who just wanted to help with planning. What kind of information? Well, like you mentioned, you'd owned other property. Are there ongoing expenses we should know about? Property taxes, insurance, anything that might affect your monthly budget? She was fishing again, but more carefully this time. There are some ongoing financial obligations, I said. Nothing you need to worry about. Of course not. I just meant if you ever needed help organizing paperwork or if you wanted Michael to review any documents with you, we're here to help. Documents. She really wanted to see my documents. That afternoon, while I was reading in the living room, a package arrived by certified mail. I signed for it and brought it upstairs to my room. Brittany watched the entire process from the kitchen doorway. 20 minutes later, she knocked on my bedroom door. Everything okay, George? That looked like important mail. Just some routine paperwork, I said through the door. Paperwork about what? I opened the door. She was trying to look casual, leaning against the door frame, but her eyes kept darting to my desk where the package sat unopened. Legal documents, I said. Nothing urgent. Legal documents about the house? Among other things. She was getting frustrated. I could see it in how she was chewing her lower lip, a nervous habit I'd noticed whenever Michael brought up money troubles. George, I have to ask directly. Are there any legal issues we should know about? Anything that might affect our living situation here? Our living situation. Still claiming ownership. Not in the way you're thinking, I said. What way am I thinking? You're thinking about security, about whether you'll still have a place to live. Well, yes, I mean, we've made this our home. We've put work into it, money into improvements. What improvements? She gestured vaguely. The bathroom renovation last year, new appliances, landscaping. How much did those improvements cost? I don't know exactly. Michael handles those expenses, but probably $8,000 or $9,000 total. $8,000 or $9,000. Interesting number. And you paid for those improvements how? Credit cards, mostly. Michael's been working extra jobs to pay them down. Extra jobs. Michael had been working extra jobs to pay for improvements to my house, while I'd been quietly helping with his mortgage payments on my house. Those must be substantial credit card balances, I said. Well, yes, but we're managing. Michael's very responsible about money. Responsible. Michael was responsible enough to accept my help with mortgage payments, but not responsible enough to tell his wife where the money was coming from. My phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. Jim Sullivan. I need to take this call, I told Brittany. Of course, I'll just... privately. She looked hurt, but stepped back so I could close the door. Jim, thanks for calling back. George, I've reviewed the documents you wanted prepared. Everything looks correct, but I want to make sure you've thought this through completely. I have. The timing is quite specific. You're sure about the trigger date? Absolutely sure. And you understand this action, once initiated, cannot be easily reversed? I understand. All right then, I'll have everything ready for your signature. When would you like to schedule the meeting? As soon as possible. When I ended the call and opened my door, Brittany was gone, but I could hear her downstairs, talking rapidly to someone on the phone. I don't know what he's planning, but something's happening. Yes, legal documents. No, he won't say what kind. She was talking to Michael. Can you come home early? I think we need to have a family meeting about this whole situation. A family meeting. The last resort of people who are losing control of a situation. That evening, Michael came home with an anxious expression and a bag of takeout Chinese food. Dad, Brittany says you've been getting legal documents. Is everything all right? We sat around the kitchen table, cartons of sweet and sour pork and fried rice between us. Everything's fine, Michael. But the documents are necessary preparations. Preparations for what? I looked at both of them. Michael genuinely concerned. Brittany pretending to be concerned, but really just hungry for information. Preparations for making sure everyone gets what they deserve. The garage sale was Brittany's idea, and it was supposed to be her moment of complete triumph. She announced it at breakfast on Friday morning, June 14th. I've been thinking about our storage situation, she said, buttering her toast with deliberate precision. We have so much unnecessary clutter, and with Michael's tools in the garage, we really need to make space. Michael looked up from his coffee. What kind of clutter? Well, George's things, for starters. All those boxes from his old house that he never unpacked. Books, clothes, random household items he'll never use again. My things. The boxes I'd brought when I moved in, assuming temporarily, thinking I'd eventually sort through Dorothy's belongings when I was emotionally ready. I thought I might organize a neighborhood garage sale tomorrow, she continued. Patty Henderson mentioned she has things to sell too, and the Johnsons down the street. We could make it a community event. A garage sale sounds fine, Michael said, but maybe we should let Dad decide what he wants to sell. Of course, Brittany said quickly. I just thought I could help with the organizing. Some of those items have been sitting untouched for 3 years. The way she said untouched made it sound like neglect rather than grief. Saturday morning arrived with perfect garage sale weather. Sunny, 75 degrees, light breeze. By 8 a.m., Brittany had transformed our front yard into a retail operation. Card tables borrowed from the church, colorful balloons tied to the mailbox, everything organized by category and price. I watched from the living room window as neighbors started arriving. Patty Henderson set up her table of kitchen items and books. The Johnsons brought clothing and old electronics. Brittany had set up the largest table featuring what she called vintage household goods and collectibles. That's when I saw my things. Dorothy's jewelry box, the one her mother had given her for their wedding. Price tag, $15. My collection of presidential biographies, leather-bound first editions I'd been collecting since my 20s. Price tags, $2 each. And there, sitting in a shoebox marked military memorabilia, $5, was my Purple Heart. The Purple Heart I'd earned in Vietnam in 1971. The Purple Heart. Dorothy had polished every Veterans Day for 45 years. The Purple Heart that represented 6 months in a military hospital and a permanent limp that still bothered me on rainy days. $5. I walked outside. Morning, George, Patty Henderson called from her table. Beautiful day for a sale. Morning, Patty. Brittany looked up from arranging items on her table. She was wearing her best casual outfit, the kind of carefully assembled look designed to appear effortless while actually requiring significant preparation. George, perfect timing. I was hoping you could tell people about some of these vintage items. Personal stories always help with sales. Personal stories. She wanted me to help her sell my personal belongings by telling the stories that made them meaningful. What's the story behind this? Asked a woman I didn't recognize, holding up Dorothy's jewelry box. Brittany jumped in before I could answer. Oh, that belonged to George's deceased wife. It's got such character, real wood construction. You don't find craftsmanship like that anymore. The woman opened the lid. Inside was Dorothy's engagement ring, her wedding band, and the small diamond earrings I'd given her for our 25th anniversary. Are the jewelry pieces included? The woman asked. "Those are just for display," Brittany said quickly. "But the box itself is a steal at $15, just for display." Dorothy's rings, the rings she'd worn every day for 45 years, were now window dressing for a garage sale. A teenage boy picked up one of my books. "Presidential biographies are so boring," he said to his father. $2 for this old thing?" "It's a first edition," I said quietly. The father looked interested. "First edition of what?" "Truman's Memoirs, signed by the president in 1956. The book was worth at least $300, maybe more." Brittany shot me a look that clearly said, "Don't interfere with the pricing." But the worst moment came when a young couple approached the military memorabilia box. "What's this, metal?" the woman asked, holding up my Purple Heart. "Some old military thing," Brittany said dismissively. "The whole box is $5. Probably good for costume parties or theater props." "Costume parties, theater props." The man looked more closely at the medal. "Ma'am, I think this is a Purple Heart. These are given to soldiers wounded in combat." "Oh," Brittany said, clearly not understanding the significance. "Well, it's still $5 for the whole box." By this point, a small crowd had gathered around the tables. Word was spreading through the neighborhood about the garage sale, and more people kept arriving. I watched Brittany work the crowd like a professional salesperson, chatting with customers, negotiating prices, making change from a shoebox full of bills and coins. "George has so many interesting items," she announced to the group. "He's downsizing to move into assisted living, so everything must go." Assisted living. She was telling the entire neighborhood that I was being moved into assisted living. "Such a shame when elderly people have to give up their independence," said a woman I recognized from the grocery store. "But I suppose it's inevitable." "Well, we've tried to make it work here," Brittany said with a sigh. "But caring for an elderly family member is just so demanding. We're young. We want to start our own family. And honestly, George needs more attention than we can provide." The lies were getting more elaborate. She was painting herself as the long-suffering caregiver, and me as the burdensome dependent. "Plus," she continued, "this house is really too big for 3 adults. Once George moves out, we'll finally have space for a proper home office and maybe a nursery down the road." Our neighbor Patty was watching this performance with a puzzled expression. She'd lived across the street for 15 years. She knew the history of this house. A man in his 50s approached the military memorabilia box. Unlike the others, he handled the Purple Heart with obvious respect. "Sir," he said, addressing me directly, "this medal belongs to you?" "Yes." "Would you mind if I asked where you served?" "Vietnam, 1970 to 1971. "Thank you for your service." He set the medal back in the box carefully. "Ma'am," he said to Brittany, "I don't think you understand what you're selling here." "It's just old military stuff," Brittany said. $5 for the box. "This is a Purple Heart. It's awarded to service members killed or wounded by enemy action. It's not something you sell at a garage sale." Brittany looked annoyed. "Oh, look, it's been sitting in a box for 3 years. Everything must go." "But it's not yours to sell," the man said firmly. That's when Brittany made her fatal mistake. She turned to face the growing crowd of neighbors and customers, raised her voice, and said, "Actually, everything here belongs to me. George is a dependent living in my house, rent-free, contributing nothing. These items are taking up space that we need for our own lives. If he was so attached to them, he shouldn't have let them sit in boxes collecting dust." The crowd went quiet. This old military junk, these moldy books, that jewelry box from someone who's been dead for 3 years, it's all just clutter. And frankly, I'm tired of being the bad guy for wanting to reclaim our own living space from someone else's trash. My Purple Heart was not trash. Dorothy's jewelry box was not clutter. Our 45 years of memories were not junk to be sold for garage sale prices. But I still didn't say anything. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and sent a text message. "It's time." The text message I sent was to Jim Sullivan, my lawyer. His response came back within 30 seconds. "On my way." 20 minutes later, a black BMW pulled up to the curb. Jim stepped out wearing his usual Saturday casual clothes, khakis and a polo shirt, but carrying his leather briefcase. "Morning, George," he called out as he approached the garage sale tables. "Morning, Jim." Brittany looked up from counting money in her shoebox. "Are you here to shop?" she asked with her best customer service smile. Actually, I'm here to see George, Jim said. I'm his attorney. The word attorney had an immediate effect on the crowd. Conversations quieted. People stopped browsing and started paying attention. Is there some kind of problem? Michael asked, appearing from the garage where he'd been organizing tools. No problem at all, Jim said. Just some paperwork to finalize. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. George, I have those documents you requested, along with something I thought you might find interesting. He handed me a magazine. Current issue of Forbes. Dated May 2024. Page 47, he said. I think you'll want to share this with your family. Brittany was watching this exchange with growing unease. George, what's going on? I opened the magazine to page 47. There was a full-page article titled America's Secret Philanthropists, the Wealthy Who Give Anonymously. And there, in the center of the page, was a photograph of me standing outside Children's Hospital of Minneapolis, shaking hands with the hospital administrator. The caption read, George Mitchell, founder of the Mitchell Children's Foundation, has donated over $35 million to pediatric healthcare facilities across the Midwest. Mitchell, who prefers to keep his charitable giving private, established the foundation in memory of his late wife, Dorothy. The silence that followed was complete. Patty Henderson was the first to speak. George, is that you in the magazine? Yes, I said quietly. Brittany grabbed the magazine from my hands, staring at the photograph, then at the article, then at me. This is impossible, she said. This has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake, Jim said calmly. George has been featured in several publications over the years for his philanthropic work. But he's... Brittany gestured at my thrift store clothes, my old bicycle. He shops at Goodwill. He rides a 20-year-old bike. He doesn't have money. Appearances can be deceiving, I said. The crowd was pressing closer now, everyone trying to see the magazine. Word was spreading through the garage sale. The quiet old man in the cardigan was apparently a millionaire. George, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper, is this real? Very real. Jim opened his briefcase again and pulled out a thick folder. George asked me to prepare these documents for his family to review. He spread several papers on Brittany's card table, moving aside her carefully priced merchandise. First, we have current bank statements for the Mitchell Family Trust. Balance as of June 15, 2024, $2,837,000. Brittany made a small choking sound. Second, we have the incorporation documents for the Mitchell Children's Foundation, showing an endowment of $35 million, with George as the founding trustee. The garage sale customers were now completely focused on our conversation. Some were taking pictures with their phones. And third, Jim continued, we have the property deed for 4,247 Maple Grove Circle. He held up an official document with the county seal clearly visible. This property was purchased in 1987 by George and Dorothy Mitchell for $127,000. Following Dorothy's death, full ownership transferred to George Mitchell. That's impossible, Brittany said, but her voice was shaking now. Michael pays the mortgage. We've been making payments for 5 years. There is no mortgage, Jim said. This property has been owned free and clear since 1994, but the monthly payments... What monthly payments? I asked gently. Michael looked confused. Dad, the mortgage payments. The $2,100 I give you every month. You give them to me, I said. I've been depositing them into your savings account. My savings account? Jim pulled out another document. George opened a savings account in your name, Michael. He's been depositing your rent payments, because that's what they actually are, rent payments to your father, into an account for you. Current balance, just over $63,000. Michael sat down heavily on Patty Henderson's folding chair. You've been paying rent to live in my house, I explained. I just never told you it was rent, and I saved every penny for you. Brittany was staring at the documents spread across her table like they were written in a foreign language. This doesn't make sense, she said. If you own this house, if you have all this money, why do you live like... Like what? Like you're poor. Because money isn't the point, I said. Character is the point. How you treat people is the point. The man who'd recognized my Purple Heart stepped forward. Ma'am, Do you understand what just happened here? Brittany looked at him blankly. You just spent the morning telling your neighbors that this war veteran was a burden. You called his Purple Heart junk. You sold his deceased wife's belongings for $15. You told everyone he was a deadweight taking up space in your house. But I didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked. You never bothered to learn anything about the man you've been treating like garbage. Other neighbors were nodding in agreement. The woman who'd wanted to buy Dorothy's jewelry box looked embarrassed and walked away from the table. George, Patty Henderson said, I remember when you and Dorothy moved into this neighborhood. You've lived here longer than anyone except the Johnsons. 37 years, I confirmed. And Brittany, Patty continued, her voice taking on the firm tone she'd probably used with misbehaving fourth graders. I've watched you treat this man with disrespect for 3 years. I've heard you call him names, seen you roll your eyes when he talks, watched you act like he was some charity case you were graciously tolerating. Mrs. Henderson, I was just trying to help him plan for his future. By selling his Purple Heart for $5? Brittany had no answer for that. Jim cleared his throat. There's one more document, George. He pulled out a final paper, this one with a red seal. The donation agreement you signed 3 weeks ago. Donation agreement? Michael asked. George has decided to donate this property to Children's Hospital of Minneapolis. The transfer becomes effective immediately upon his request. He's donating our house? Brittany's voice was getting higher. He's donating his house, Jim corrected. You've been living here as his guests. But we've put money into improvements, renovations. $8,000 in improvements, I said. I've been keeping track, Jim nodded. George is prepared to reimburse you for documented home improvements, minus the $63,000 in rent money he saved for you, so you'll actually come out ahead financially. But where will we live? For the first time since the revelation began, I felt a moment of sympathy for Brittany. She looked genuinely lost. That's not my problem to solve, I said quietly. You spent 3 years telling me I needed to find somewhere else to live. Now it's your turn. The garage sale crowd had grown to nearly 30 people. Several were taking videos with their phones. This story was going to be all over social media within hours. George, Michael said, I had no idea about any of this. The house, the money. I know you didn't. Why didn't you tell us? I looked around at the tables full of my belongings, price tags attached to my memories, my Purple Heart sitting in a $5 box, because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer. Jim, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I'd like to execute the donation agreement now. Are you certain, George? Once I make this call, the transfer process begins immediately. I'm certain. Jim pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Bill Crawford, please. This is Jim Sullivan. Bill Crawford was the development director at Children's Hospital. We'd been planning this donation for months. Bill, it's Jim. George Mitchell has decided to proceed with the property donation. Yes, today. No, he's sure. I'll send the paperwork within the hour. While Jim was on the phone, I addressed the crowd of neighbors. I want everyone to understand what's happening here. 3 weeks ago, I made a difficult decision. My daughter-in-law had made it clear that she wanted me out of this house. She'd researched nursing homes, demanded my financial information, and told me repeatedly that I was a burden who contributed nothing to this household. Brittany tried to interrupt. George, I never meant... Please, let me finish. The authority in my voice surprised even me. Rather than fight about it, I decided to grant her wish. If she wanted me gone, if she felt this house was too good for me, then I would make sure she got what she wanted. I picked up my Purple Heart from the $5 box and held it up for everyone to see. This medal represents 6 months in a military hospital. It represents fighting for a country that didn't always appreciate the sacrifice. It represents coming home to build a life with a woman who understood the value of service. Several veterans in the crowd nodded in recognition. Dorothy and I bought this house in 1987. We paid it off early by working 2 jobs each and saving every penny. We never had children, but we made this neighborhood our family. We helped neighbors, supported local businesses, contributed to community fundraisers. Patty Henderson wiped her eyes with a tissue. When Dorothy died, I thought I'd found a new family with my son and his wife. I thought I could contribute by helping with expenses, sharing my experience, being a grandfather figure when they decided to have children. Dad, Michael said quietly. "You could still be that." "Not here," I said firmly. "Not after this morning." Jim finished his phone call. "Bill Crawford says the hospital board is thrilled. They'll have a crew here Monday morning to assess the property and begin the transition paperwork." "Monday morning?" Brittany looked panicked. "But where are we supposed to go?" "You have 30 days to relocate," Jim explained. "That's standard for property transfers." 30 days? "Brittany," I said, 3 weeks ago you wanted me in a nursing home next month. You've had the same amount of time to prepare that you were giving me." The garage sale customers were beginning to disperse, but many lingered to hear the conclusion of this drama. I heard whispered conversations. "Did you see how she treated him? Selling a Purple Heart for $5? I can't believe she didn't know he owned the house." Michael stepped closer to me. "Dad, I need you to know that I never supported the nursing home idea. I never wanted you to leave." "Then why didn't you stop it?" I don't know. Brittany seemed so sure it was the right thing. Brittany seemed sure about a lot of things that weren't true. I began collecting my belongings from the garage sale tables. The Purple Heart went back in its velvet case. Dorothy's jewelry box was removed from sale. My presidential biographies were stacked carefully. "George," Brittany said, "can we talk privately, please?" "There's nothing left to discuss privately. But surely we can work something out. I mean, we're family. Family members don't sell each other's Purple Hearts for costume party props." Jim was packing his briefcase. "George, I'll need you to come to the office Monday to sign the final transfer documents. I'll be there. And we should discuss your living arrangements. The hospital has offered you a lifetime residence option in their senior faculty housing if you're interested." Senior faculty housing, a community of retired professors and professionals with medical care available, but independence maintained. That sounds perfect. As Jim drove away, the remaining garage sale crowd began to break up. Patty Henderson approached me. "George, I want you to know that not everyone in this neighborhood supported how you were being treated. Thank you, Patty. Dorothy would be proud of how you handled this." That meant more to me than she could know. Brittany and Michael were standing by their now empty card table, surrounded by the belongings they'd planned to sell. "The garage sale's over," I announced to the few remaining customers. "Everything's been withdrawn from sale." As the last neighbors walked away, taking their garage sale stories with them, I realized something important had happened here. Not just the revelation of my wealth or the property donation, but something more fundamental. I'd finally set a boundary, and boundaries, once set clearly, change everything. The first consequence came within hours. By Saturday evening, cell phone videos of the garage sale confrontation were circulating on social media. Someone had posted a clip on TikTok with the caption, "Daughter-in-law sells war hero's Purple Heart for $5, finds out he's a millionaire who owns her house." The video went viral overnight. By Sunday morning, it had been viewed 400,000 times. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. "George, this is Channel 5 News. We'd like to do a story about your donation to Children's Hospital." "George, this is the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Can we schedule an interview?" I turned off my phone. Michael knocked on my bedroom door around 8 a.m. "Dad, there are news trucks outside." I looked out my window. 3 television vans with satellite dishes were parked along Maple Grove Circle. Reporters were setting up cameras on the sidewalk. "They want to interview you about yesterday," Michael said. "I'm not interested in interviews." "But this could be good publicity for your foundation work." "Michael, I've been doing foundation work for 10 years without publicity. I don't need it now." What I didn't tell him was that the media attention wasn't the story I cared about. The story I cared about was happening inside our house. Brittany hadn't spoken to me since the revelation. She'd spent Saturday evening on her laptop, frantically searching for apartments within their budget. Every few minutes, she'd make a frustrated sound and close the laptop screen. "Everything's too expensive," she'd told Michael. "We can't afford anything decent with 30 days' notice." "We have the $63,000 Dad saved for us," Michael had pointed out. "That's not going to last long with security deposits and moving expenses." The financial reality was setting in. Without my house to live in rent-free, their monthly expenses would increase by at least $1,500. Michael's construction income was irregular, and Brittany's jewelry business brought in almost nothing. But the financial consequences weren't the worst part for Brittany. The social consequences were. By Sunday afternoon, the TikTok video had been shared on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Local news stations were running segments about the Purple Heart garage sale story. The neighborhood was buzzing with activity as reporters tried to interview neighbors. Patty Henderson had given a television interview defending me. George Mitchell is one of the most respected residents of this community. He and his wife Dorothy were the kind of neighbors everyone wishes they had, but she'd also been honest about what she'd witnessed. I've seen how the daughter-in-law treated him for years, like he was some kind of burden instead of the homeowner doing them a favor. Other neighbors were less diplomatic on social media. Comments on the viral video included, "Imagine being so greedy and disrespectful that you sell someone's military medal for $5. This woman treated a war veteran like trash and then discovered he's worth millions. The karma is perfect. I hope she learned something about judging people by appearances." By Monday morning, Brittany's employer had seen the video. She worked part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, and the office manager called her at 9 a.m. "Brittany, we need to discuss the social media situation." Brittany came home from that conversation in tears. "They put me on indefinite leave," she told Michael. "They said the negative publicity was affecting the practice. Can they do that?" "Apparently yes, if it impacts their business reputation." The professional consequences extended beyond her job. Brittany's small jewelry business depended on local customers and word-of-mouth recommendations. Several customers had already canceled orders after seeing the video, but perhaps the most devastating consequence was the loss of social standing in the neighborhood. The garage sale had been attended by dozens of neighbors who'd witnessed her behavior firsthand. The video had been seen by thousands more. Every time she left the house, people stared. Some were curious, some were judgmental, but none were friendly. "I can't go to the grocery store without someone recognizing me," she told Michael. "The cashier yesterday asked if I was the woman from the Purple Heart video." Michael was dealing with his own consequences. His construction crew had seen the video and several co-workers were asking uncomfortable questions. "Your dad's really worth millions? Why didn't you know your wife was selling his Purple Heart? Is it true he owns your house?" The revelation that he'd been unknowingly paying rent to his father was particularly embarrassing for Michael. It made him look either naive or irresponsible with money. Meanwhile, Children's Hospital had announced the property donation publicly, generating positive media coverage for both the hospital and my foundation work. The hospital administrator gave an interview praising my quiet generosity and lifelong commitment to helping children. The contrast between the media coverage was stark. I was being portrayed as a humble philanthropist who'd endured years of mistreatment with dignity. Brittany was being portrayed as a greedy daughter-in-law who'd shown her true character when she thought she held all the power. On Tuesday morning, Jim Sullivan called with an update. "George, the hospital's property assessment team was very impressed. They're estimating the house value at $650,000. That's more than I expected. It's a substantial donation. They want to hold a dedication ceremony next month if you're agreeable. A ceremony where the community would learn about my generosity and remember Brittany's garage sale behavior." "I'll consider it," I said. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 weeks earlier, Brittany had wanted me gone to make room for her home office. Now she was about to lose the house entirely, while I became a local hero. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices. 3 weeks later, I moved into my new apartment at University Gardens Senior Community. It wasn't senior faculty housing as Jim had mentioned, but it was something better. A vibrant community of retired professionals who chose active independence over assisted living. My apartment had 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and a view of the community garden. Dorothy would have loved the flower beds. Michael helped me move. We didn't talk much during the packing, but as we loaded the last box into his truck, he finally spoke. "Dad, I need to apologize." "For what?" "For letting Brittany treat you the way she did, for not standing up for you, for not knowing about the house, the money, any of it. Michael, you couldn't have known what I didn't tell you. But I should have known that her behavior was wrong, regardless of your financial situation." He was right about that. "What are you going to do?" I asked. About Brittany? About your marriage. Michael was quiet for a long moment. We're going to counseling. She's not the person I thought I married. Or maybe she is, and I just didn't want to see it. They'd found an apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. Brittany had gotten a new job at a different dental office, but the pay was lower. The transition had been difficult. The counselor says Brittany needs to understand why her behavior was harmful, not just apologize because she got caught. That's wise advice. Dad, is there any chance, would you consider letting us visit sometimes? I thought about this question carefully. When Brittany can explain to me why what she did was wrong, not because I turned out to be wealthy, but because it was wrong regardless, then we can talk about visits. Michael nodded. That's fair. As his truck pulled away from University Gardens, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. That evening, I had dinner with my new neighbors in the community dining room. I met Margaret, a retired teacher who'd been married to a military officer. James, a former newspaper editor. Patricia, a retired nurse who'd worked in pediatrics. People who understood that wealth isn't what you own, but how you treat others when you think nobody's watching. If you're watching this story, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Sometimes the hardest thing about setting boundaries isn't the confrontation. It's finally accepting that some people only respect you when they need something from you. And that's not family. That's just proximity.